Welcome to the Union Federation podcast, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. My name is Kevin. I'm going to be your captain for this episode. And with me, I'd like to bring my co-captain here, my fellow brother from another mother, and also my fellow Fandom Podcast Network co-founder. I'd like to bring in Mr. Kyle Wagner. How are you, sir?
I am well. I am ready to do this podcast. The Force is with me.
Ah, nice. So we're kind of a skeleton crew today. Both our other officers, Amy Nelson and Haley Starter, can't make it with us this time, but they'll be back soon for some other upcoming shows. But it's just going to be you and I, kind of doing the dude thing here, Kyle, talking some Orville.
Yes, we are. Now, are we sure we haven't had any DNA rewriting on Amy or Haley? I just want to be certain of that, Kevin, because.
Well, when we get into this episode, we'll find out if certain crew members actually return or not. So we'll find out. This is Union Federation episode 131, and we are discussing the Orville New Horizons. And this is season 3, of course, and we are discussing the episode 2, Shadow Realms. A little bit darker episode. So real quick before we go any further. Spoilers ahead. We are going to discuss the episode and its plot points. So be warned. Be warned of the what is it? The Expanse, I guess is what they called it. The area with no light. The demon zone.
Yeah. Come on, it's the cursed place where demons come from, and you lose your soul. Let's just go with the Krill explanation. It always works well.
All right. Well, let's get right into this, guys. First of all, this is episode of Shadow Realms. It aired on June 9th. Ran for about an hour and 5 minutes. Actually, I want to ask you this real quick, Kyle, before we go into the synopsis here. So we're getting longer episodes. We're kind of getting feeling if like they do go to a network show, they have these natural breaks where they could slide in a commercial from here to here. Are you feeling that thus far, the 2 episodes that we've seen, that the hour plus amount that we're getting, I mean, think about it. If there was commercials in an hour show, it would normally be about maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Are you feeling that we're getting the benefit of the extra time?
I think if I'm going to go off the first 2 episodes we've had so far, there is some benefit to the extra time. I think it gives it a little bit more of a cinematic feel with the extra time. However, I don't know necessarily, not so much with the first episode, but with this episode, and I know we'll go into this in a little bit later, but I felt like maybe with this episode, they weren't quite sure what to do with the extra time they're allotted.
I'm glad you weren't the only one that felt that, because I felt the same way. I felt there was a little parts of it. They're like, did we really need that? So yeah, we'll probably touch on that a little bit more later. So let's get into the episode synopsis here. As the crew of the Orville undergoes diplomatic negotiations with the Krill to access a previously unknown region of space, Claire reunites with her ex-husband, who happens to be her former mentor and the chief diplomat assigned to their mission. Meanwhile, despite warnings from the crew undertakes an exploration mission in an uncharted sector that is supposedly inhabited by demons. Kyle, what were your first reactions to this episode?
Well, my first reactions are, I'm going to, for just 1 second, because now we know the truth of where Amy and Haley are really doing, because I was thinking about this. They're off finishing off a bottle together.
Okay.
But no, my first reactions to this episode, I will say this, and I think it applies to both the first episode and this episode. The show is beautiful on Hulu. It looked good on Fox, but it is a whole nother level on Hulu. With this episode, I really felt there was a lot of unevenness in this episode. There's some very interesting things going on, but I think some of the interesting things that were going on were sacrificed for some weaker storylines in this episode.
That's a good point. We'll definitely touch on that, because you're not alone in there. Yeah,
I think they were definitely trying to play up some of the more. For a while, I was feeling like, is this Orville Event Horizon?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the Orville reaches the Expanse, this unexplored area, which this, according to the Krill, temporary alliance. But whether this New Horizons theme that we're getting with the Orville, it's feeling like we're definitely going to get our episodic episodes for this final season here. God, I hope I'm wrong with that, but it doesn't look like it. But it feels like we're going to obviously get some exploration going here, and this exploration in the Expanse goes dark.
Yeah, very much so. It definitely had more of that scary movie, scary sci-fi element to it, and I see what I'm seeing something here with the Orville. And again, Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And it's something I noticed in the first episode, and I noticed it in this episode too. Some of the lightheartedness of the Orville seems to have disappeared in these first 2 episodes.
Can you clarify exactly what you mean? If you mean less joking, less, do you mean like less kind of off-duty moments, or what do you mean exactly?
I feel like it's a combination of things. I think they've been okay with off-duty moments, but they've had a little bit more serious tone to them. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm not even going to go say with the joking, but the fun quality of the Orville.
Okay,
everything has been very, very heavy these first 2 episodes. You had the Kalon, everything with the Kalon, and everything with Isaac in the first episode, and then you have this trying to be more of a horror type science fiction story in this episode, playing on some of those classic type tropes. And it feels a little unbalanced right now. It feels like the Orville is being very cinematic, and it's kind of, to be cinematic, it's giving up a little bit of the heart it had.
You're waiting for it to lighten up a little bit, is what you're saying, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I completely with you there. Completely agree with everything that you said, because I was kind of feeling it too. I'm glad they weren't afraid to go this direction and go dark with this kind of horror theme that they went, or sci-fi horror, if you want to put it, which is its own subgenre from horror. But I agree with you. I was kind of, there's a couple of comments that were kind of funny here and there, but yeah, I kind of want to see it lighten up a little bit more too, whether it's a singing thing or maybe a flirting, dating thing going on between some crew members, or just something. So I get where you're going at. But I want to ask you, Kyle. So one of the moments that I did like that was, fun was Ed Mercer's New Voyage ship speech that Commander Grayson reminded him that he almost forgot to do. And he goes, quote, "We're all about to enter the unexplored space, and I know that you're all just excited as I am, and I know that you're all going to do your best. So let's give this everything we've got, and may the Force be with you." My first question, 2 parts. Actually, 2 parts of this for you, Kyle, is what'd you think of that speech, Kyle?
I thought they had some fun with it. I think they were trying to play up a little bit on, you always have the captain giving this famous speech before a mission or a new adventure, whether it's Star Trek or Star Wars or something. There's always that speech moment. And I think they were having a little lighthearted fun with that. I think it was fine. I think they could have done a little more with it, but I don't think I think it was, for what it was fine.
Right. Well, my second part of the question is, Kyle, what would be your speech to your crew if you're the captain of the Orville or an Orville type ship and you're getting ready to do a new voyage? What would you say?
That's a good question. We have been given the challenge to explore and learn and continue the human adventure and the human experience, and grow and learn from it, and continue the quest of all human desire to find the unknown, to learn. And I know that everybody on this crew is here because they are dedicated to that experience. I know we are going to do this the way we know how. And first star on the left, aim for that direction. And for everybody out there, Bazanga!
Okay, you had me taking a nap there in the middle of that, but then you kind of ended up on a high note there.
Well, that's the point. You got to start with the middle. You can start with it, and then you got to hit that exclamation point at the end.
As we enter this new voyage together, let's look out for ourselves, and let's look out after each other. But most important, let's look good doing it. Let's rock. That's mine.
There you go. Yeah. You always have to look good, The most important thing when you walk into the room with your uniform on is you can say, "I make this look good."
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, I want to touch on the cast and crew here. First of all, the director is John Cassar, who we've had done before, and written by Seth MacFarlane, Brandon Braga, and Andre Bormanis. As we got our crew back, we got a little bit more of Commander Bordas in this. A little bit, of course, Talakieli kicking some alien butt. Lamar doing some cool stuff. We had his Isaac scene, of course, stuck in his little science room and everything. But we had a guest star here, James Reed, who played Admiral Christie. We'll get a little bit more of Christie and Finn's backdrop here, but I want to get your thoughts on James Reed as Admiral Christie, our guest star here.
I liked him in this role, and he was actually in one of my favorite scenes of this episode is when he goes and has this conversation with Isaac about Isaac's experiences with Claire and trying to, that was probably one of my favorite scenes in this episode. But I liked him in this because he felt like, yes, he was an admiral that carried some weight. He was this high level negotiator, but there was also there were some sides to this that I'm like, yeah, this is definitely TV trope kind of things here, because there's a lot of this stuff that I don't even know if certain Star Trek shows would allow for some of the things that happen in this to happen.
Right.
The example I'll throw out is when they go onto the alien starship and you've got the admiral, the captain, and the first officer all going on the away team. I'm like, one of them is staying behind.
Yeah. Well, Admiral Christie, we always like to see our admirals here, and I'm glad that he wasn't like a badmiral in Star Trek. He was not evil. Played by James Reed. If he seems familiar, he's out of Buffalo, New York, and a prolific actor, been in a lot of stuff. A lot of people will know him from his soap opera work from General Hospital, and also recently Days of Our Lives, where he plays Clyde Weston. And for you movie fans, you might know him as in Legally Blonde. He played Ellie's father in Legally Blonde, and also he played Preston's father in Not Another Teen Movie. So there you go.
Can I throw in where I actually recognize him from?
Sure, yeah.
He had a pretty good run of guest appearances on the TV show Charmed, with the original version with Alyssa Milano and Holly Marie Combs and
I get you. Yeah,
Rose. Yeah. But yeah, cool. That's where I actually recognized him from.
Gotcha. So I got to. I went back to our friends there at Den of Geek, and I found I love their articles about our shows that we like to talk about, and I always like to give them credit for it. And I want to bring up this Den of Geek article by Michael Wynn Johnson, posted on June 9th, and this is the one about, of course, this episode, New Horizons Season 3, Episode 2 review, Shadow Realms. The Orville New Horizons is perhaps already getting a little too comfortable. He goes on to say, it's often the case that when someone is pitching an idea or presenting something to an audience, that they should start with a bang and grab the attention of said audience. What is also common practice is that one of your weakest ideas should be sandwiched somewhere early on, often in the second spot. The writing team of the Orville seemed to have followed that pattern perfectly in this season's first 2 episodes. Granted, it's only been 2 installments, but after last week's dynamic turn, Episode 2, Shadow Realms, certainly fizzles. Thus begins a long thread of poor writing choices for this episode, as suspension of belief becomes as dark as the starless expanse. It's easy to question the story beats used to set up the horror half of this episode and how quickly the characters fall into horror movie tropes. The rest of the episode dissolves into a fairly pedestrian, quote, monster of the week story. Christie mutates into an arachnid-looking and aggressive creature, and he somehow manages to cripple the Orville and shut down the power. This leads to characters venturing off on their own, children being left in scary hallways, things that go bump in the night, and inevitable jump scares when an unarmed crew member suddenly realizes something is behind them. Yes, there were some moments of character development for Claire, and yes, we discovered a little more about her past, but that seemed to be a side note at best in an episode that is immersed in the horror genre, and nothing truly felt like a threat. The Orville crew that were lost to this mutation were widely unnamed, and despite Christie being a central player in this particular episode, losing him had no emotional impact. As mentioned, the show will undoubtedly revisit this hostile species But the real danger here was creating a second episode that may lose more audience members than random unnamed crew members. So, Kyle, I bring this up because there's 2 points that I want to talk about here. And I want to talk about that last note there. As fans of the Orville, we're sad that it's going to be leaving. But we also have noticed that there hasn't really been big hoopla about trying to bring new viewers into the Orville than just maintaining the original fans that we had here. And the second episode doesn't really seem that might help that cause. What do you think?
So this is where I get into something that has been actually a little bit of a issue for me with the Orville as a whole. The Orville has never really been properly marketed. We've talked about this, Kevin. There's not been toys. Yes, you have that beautiful Eagle Moss model behind you of the Orville ship, but we haven't really had action figures. Fox never really got behind it. I mean, we don't even have any Blu-ray sets of the seasons, do we?
DVDs only. DVDs only.
You can get it. You could have bought it on iTunes and done that. And during the absence, that's when everything transferred over to Fox with the sale, Disney sale, and everything. It went from Fox to Hulu, and yet it felt like there was no marketing of this. Why weren't they marketing seasons 1 and 2? Yes, we've got this big season 3 coming, and it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. And then we had Seth sign his deal with Comcast NBC, which has just led everybody to automatically speculate, the Orville is done after this season. And while that may be the case, we haven't actually had official word of that. It's been all speculation at this point. But the problem is so far the way they've marketed this season, the way they've marketed the Orville, and the way that even it feels like the cast themselves on their social media stuff, it feels like, this is the last go around. So we're doing what we want for the fans that were already pre-existing instead of trying to bring in new fans. And I really think that is a problem because, and I think it's leads back to even an issue I talked about earlier. We've had 2 very dark episodes back to back. And I think if they were trying to bring in new fans, what they should have done is had that first episode with the heaviness of the Kalon, which is great because I think that's a great way to pay tribute to the fans from the first 2 seasons that have carried on. But this episode should have been a lighter-hearted episode, a little bit more fun to it, draw in some more fan base instead of to go with this heavy episode and maybe make this the 3rd or 4th episode.
Completely agree. Michael Wynn Johnson, who wrote this article in Dana Geek, gave this a 2 out of 5. So that's a low rating compared to a lot of the other stuff that they've done. And I agree with you, Kyle. This one was a little bit of a letdown. It looked great. There was some good character moments, which we'll touch on a little bit. But it's, the excitement of going into this unexplored era. It would have been nice if they met some cool people. But, of course, there has to be a reason why this is unexplored and a reason why the Krill doesn't want to go there anymore. I agree with you, and I agree with what the reviewer said here. It was a little bit of a letdown. It had its moments, but I wish that that we would have gotten a little something else different. Anyone else want to say something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, too, to me, what they could have done in this episode – with the fact that the Krill were so afraid of this demon taking control of your body, if you're going to go a little bit more to me, what the spirit of the Orville is, they get there, and maybe it's more of an alien race that humans get along with, but the Krill see them as demons because of some of the things that they believe in that aren't, and how the Krill think.
That's an excellent idea because of how they deal with their with Avis and their, was it the Ancana? Is that what their Bible's called?
Ancana,
that they view things completely different than the way we do and deal things. So I like that idea. I wish that would have been explored. So should have called you, Kyle. Good call. All right, we're going to take a break right now. But when we come back, though, we're going to talk about trivia, and then we're going to get into our way mission discussions and hit up some topics more about this episode. So we'll be right back, and we'll take a break here and let you know what other great shows are here on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, welcome back to Union Federation, episode 131. We're discussing the Orville New Horizons, season 3, episode 2, Shadow Realms. Kyle, we've got some trivia here. Do you want to hit us with some of that?
We got a little trivia. Why? Of course, it's always fun to do a little trivia. First and foremost, this episode bears noticeable similarities to Star Trek The Next Generation episode Genesis. Both episodes were scripted and co-scripted by the, of course, famous Brannon Braga. Kevin, you actually brought this to my attention on the Genesis part.
Yes, definitely. And what's funny, though, was that there was another episode that I want to tease now, but I will mention it later, that it first reminded me of, and then full on felt like Genesis. And for you guys that are listening right now or watching, think about the other episode of TNG, I will tease, that also this episode reminded me of. What else we got?
The score of this episode pays a little homage to Jerry Goldsmith's work on Alien as the Orville approaches that a bit, maybe intentionally abandoned space station.
Oh, totally. That do. Yeah, no, it totally felt like that Alien score. But Jerry Goldsmith has worked on Star Trek too, or as well as I should say, and he is probably one of the most prolific score maestros out there, and his work is awesome. And I really like the fact that Orville does pay homage to other things like Star Trek and stuff like that, and gives you that kind of epic scope as we're watching these episodes.
Yeah, no, it's something the Orville has done since season 1, and it's shown its Star Trek ties both within its own storytelling and obviously with some of the creative people behind the camera and in front of the camera as well. And that's one of the things I really, Seth MacFarlane obviously is very much known for being a huge Star Trek fan, and it shows in this series. But I think with so far what we've seen in New Horizons too, he's getting to pay a little homage to other things in science fiction that he liked as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the score to Alien and Aliens is fantastic. I think Horner does the second film, if I remember correctly. But they're both when it comes to those creepy moments, it's so good, so good. All right. Well, we got some away missions to get into here, so let's check this out. All right, so the first away mission, I thought we would discuss a little character discussion here. We touched on it earlier. We learned more about Dr. Claire Finn. She's been married before to our guest star character, Admiral Christie. We find out in that moment with her and Commander Grayson that she was a student of his, and they had a little student slash professor forbidden love affair, so to speak, and they kind of kept it going for a little bit, but didn't quite work out. Penny Johnson is great as Claire Finn, and we're getting a lot of character development with her, because we got that first of all in the last episode with her having to deal with her son's response and also everyone else's response to her friendship and relationship with Isaac. Now we learn a little bit more about her past, and we find out that Admiral Christie didn't know that she had kids as well. What were your thoughts on the subplot here?
So I enjoyed the concept of it. There's a few things within the writing of this, though, that I felt like maybe there was some holes in the writing where if the editors didn't quite think about everything that was going on. An example of this for me is, I'm sorry, Jane, if he's an admiral and he's kind of followed Claire's career, she would, considering the impact her sons have had within things that happened in the Orville, he would know about her having 2 kids.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
And the other thing to me is, if we're looking at timeline based and they were married, it had to have been a pretty short marriage, because, when you look at the age of Ty and Marcus, and I don't ever remember hearing about Ty and Marcus's father.
I think they were adopted by her, if I remember correctly. That might have been mentioned in season 1, and it's been a while. I can't remember the details. Help me out, fans listening, but I think she adopted them.
That could be. I'll do a little research on
I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
Yeah, but I'm again, just timetable wise, if they were natural childbirth for her, that's a very tight timetable. I'm just going with that. But I did like the aspect of it, and I liked how they played it up when she heard his name coming on the ship. How she just kind of, you knew something was there,
right?
Maybe whether it was a relationship or if they had there.
Yeah, Ali knew something was up.
Yeah, and I really like James Reed in his role as Admiral Christie, because what was nice about it was, like you said, he wasn't necessarily a badmiral. He was a guy he seemed like an admiral we could associate with.
Yeah.
That with the negotiations, and I liked in that scene where they're negotiating with the Krill, how even like Ed and Kelly aren't real comfortable with certain things, but he kind of reassures them. And
yeah, like when they were discussing about the planet that the Krill wanted to use to get stuff for their fuel, and yeah.
So I like that. And again, I like his character in general. I love that scene between him and Isaac, where he's kind of trying to get some information out of Isaac. And I think it played off very well with the human versus Kalon and human emotions, but Isaac kind of has an understanding. And then, of course, we won't talk about that other thing that they were talking about.
Right.
But no, I think it played very well. And I think it played into the episode, as far as even when you got to the climax where she was trying to reach any humanity left in Admiral Christie. And I think that played up pretty well, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was thinking about the reviewer of Dead Geek said about not being emotionally attached to the character of Admiral Christie, I don't know if it was the lack of remorse or response that Claire Finn had regarding that he had been turned completely and now he's a different species and there's no return of this guy, or if there just wasn't enough done with his character to make you want to see him again, I guess is my kind of issue. I liked what I saw, but I guess I wanted to see more. What about you? What do you think?
I think that you hit the nail on the head as far as they just didn't feel like there was that chemistry between them. And I don't know if it's because of how Penny Johnson played it as Claire Finn, where she was
standoffish. That's why
she was beyond standoffish. It really felt like it was like she really wanted nothing to do with this guy. Didn't want to be around him. Didn't want to deal with her past or anything like that. And
so hold on a second. If they had played this differently, that she had her heart broken and that she was maybe still in love with him, that might have played better. Do you think?
I think even if it was more of, there was a little bit more anger, over it, like, because it was opening old wounds, but she just kind of played it. She played it very even keel, emotional. I get why there was no remorse when she spread the virus, because at the end of the day, she's protecting the crew and her children.
Right.
But I will say this. I think it was a very nice touch, the end scene of the episode where she's dining alone. And you can kind of tell maybe that she was having a little remorse then, and then having Isaac come talk to her to check on her.
Right.
And then the two of them sitting together. I think that was a nice little touch to not only showing a little bit of remorse, but reuniting her with Isaac, even if it's just on a friendship level.
Yeah,
because
and the fact that
Isaac,
he was kind enough to come over and check on her, which was kind of cool. So yeah.
Well, and even Isaac had said in the conversation with Admiral Christie he missed Claire. He missed his interactions with Claire.
All right. Well, we're gonna transport away on our second away mission here. We're gonna go into forbidden space. All right,
hey,
a couple things.
Kevin,
What
did you do with the stars? It's just black.
Oh man, it is black.
Are you sure this is not? Is this Raider space and not Forbidden space?
I know, right? Look good in black. That's right. That's what we do. That's the way we roll. All right, so a couple things here. This episode we touched on before bears similarities to the Star Trek Next Generation Season 7 episode Genesis. And before I go any further, I did tease, of course, there was another episode this reminded me of, but Genesis is when, just a reminder, this is when a new torpedo guidance system malfunctions and Picard and Data have to go chase after it into an asteroid field. And when they retrieve it and come back, something's wrong with the Enterprise. The power's out and people start evolving into weird creatures. And we see, I think it's number one, Riker de-evolve into like a caveman, and everyone gets really afraid of like Worf because he's like gone into some like demon-looking monster. Among other characters, changes were very interesting. But the other episode that this started to remind me of was the one that was around Geordi LaForge in the season 4 episode Identity Crisis, where Geordi LaForge and an old friend fight to defeat a parasite that has been trying to transform them into another species, because they went on that away mission many years ago, and there was something that stayed in them, and it's slowly turning them into one of those creatures and wanting to make everyone return back to that planet. And we saw a little bit of that parallels with this episode when Admiral Christie gets like spat in the face, or not spat in the face, but like something in his eyes.
Like his eyes and what he breathed in.
He breathed in. That's right. Yeah.
That microbacteria.
Exactly. And then he slowly kind of starts to change a little bit, just like the people in that TNG episode, where eventually they turn into those weird creatures with the weird blue veins and stuff like that, and they completely transform. But luckily, Geordi and his friend were able to be saved. So I wanted to get your thoughts. Were these right away reminding you of those episodes, or did you hear about it later?
As soon as he got spat in the face, I went, "Oh, here we go!" Because then when Identity Crisis is right where my head went, and then it just even confirmed it more when they talked about, oh yeah, his DNA is being rewritten. Yeah. Now, I will say this, a little bit of spoiler here, and of course we did spoiler warnings at the beginning of the show. One of the things I did like when they were talking about like this DNA change, though, was that they found a weakness in the aspect that the immune system was compromised from it. And I really actually, there's some science that Haley's not here, so the body goes through this massive change. It should affect the human immune system. And right. I really like that they kind of dug up that was kind of where they discovered the weakness. I actually thought that was very well written by the writers this week, and using that as kind of how they find a weakness for these creatures.
When they got into the tech part of this. Yeah, that's a good point. And the science and everything. Yeah. I did notice the comparisons right away. And I like when the Orville borrows from Star Trek and pays homage to it. But I don't know if this, I kind of felt though that this was done a little too much homage. Yeah. I'm not going to call it plagiarism, but if you got the same guy that worked on both the Star Trek and the Orville scripts, Mr. Braga, maybe do a little bit better. I don't know. I just my opinion on that. So, I want to quote something else from the Den of Geek article here, where they say, quote, "The Krill show more fear than ever before on this show, saying that this is basically forbidden space. The Expanse is a place of pure evil, inhabited by demons that even the most righteous are possessed by this evil and commit heinous acts." I thought this was interesting to see the Krill afraid of something.
I thought that was interesting. And like I said, there was a time for about the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes of this episode. I'm like, are we on Orville? Like I said at the top of the show, are we on Orville Event Horizon? Because of how I liked how they incorporated the Krill's religion into that.
Right. Yeah.
And so you kind of have that thought process. And like I said, though, I think they could have played on it in a fun Orville way, but the
Krill are afraid of these creatures and they're not like what we saw. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I get why they went this direction too. And I think it was for what it was. It was I understand why they made that choice to go in that direction, but I agree with the Den of Geek article here, Kevin. And I think you agree with it too. It made for a lot of really simple tropes, and it really, they didn't challenge. It didn't feel like they were challenging themselves in this episode.
We give it props for this episode. I'm going to give it props for the look, cinematography, the sets, the makeup for the creatures was fantastic.
The transformation shots.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. But the thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit more is this episode seemed to go much darker, of course, than the TNG episode comparisons, of course, that we're talking about is the episode Genesis and Identity Crisis. Because for Star Trek fans in Genesis, everything got cleared up. Everyone lived, if I remember correctly, at least everyone that we cared about anyway. In Identity Crisis, there was a few crew members that we did lose that made that full metamorphosis into those creatures. But Geordi was saved, and his old crew member was saved. The guest star was saved. But dude, in this one, Admiral Christie, done, gone. The other creatures, other crew members, unknown, of course, done. Now, would you write them off as dead, presumed dead? What does our captain say to their family members? They died. They transformed into another creature that we can't reverse in this forbidden zone. What were your thoughts on how they dealt with that?
I'm glad you brought this up because I had some thoughts on this. One, I actually liked the fact that they stayed a little darker and didn't have just this magic, oh, we found a cure, everybody's good. I actually like that aspect. But here's where I want to flip it a little bit, because in the aspect of, I don't want to, if this is the last season of the Orville, I'm fine if we don't see these creatures again. I think this is something to where if the Orville was to continue on for a couple more seasons, we could come back and revisit these creatures, because they did say we will see, they made it clear that these were creatures we could easily see again at some point.
Yes.
But it would be interesting to see them develop these creatures more. Obviously, we see where the Admiral still has a little. He stops, he talks. I love the whole interaction with Isaac, and where they kind of just stared at him and realized they can't do anything with him.
Yeah. That was an interesting scene. Isaac's just like, "What up? What are you gonna do to me, huh?" And the creature's like, "You're not biological. I got nothing."
Yeah,
that was a good point. I'm kind of torn on what I would have liked to have seen. I mean, if one of our own crew members had gotten infected and started transforming, and we lost them, I don't know if they could have let that happen. But if maybe they found a way to reverse it, then that would have been interesting. But because we had to Admiral Christie, he's one and done character that we know so far, and these other characters that weren't, or these other crew members that were taken from us, there was no emotional attachment to them. So I just wish there was something a little bit more there regarding the attachment and wanting to care for the people that we actually did lose. Whether it was like maybe less creeping, running around the ship from these people. Maybe there was a crew member that was also introduced that we also cared about, or maybe was, affected by someone else in the crew or something. I just wish there was just something else. You know what I mean, Kyle?
Yeah, they didn't. The problem is again, it's for the most part, it's nameless crew and it's character that they just introduced. There's no weight to any of this. The only weight is the threat that they developed. But again, because we know this is probably the last season of the Orville, how much weight does that even have?
Yeah.
And so it's a cool. There's some cool concept here, but it's also like, where are we going with this? This is not the time for the Orville to be introducing a bunch of new stuff unless we knew we were getting more. If we find out we're getting more, I'm all for it. If not, let's focus on the world we've got.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with you completely on that. I see your point, though.
Well,
but this is episodic television that I know is going to have, we're still going to have the Kalon threat. But yeah, I wish that, I think we both want something weighted in this episode that would make us look back, or a reason to look back on this episode and go, well, you should watch episode 2 if you want to get this or understand that. You know what I mean?
I do want to throw out too, when we're talking about the weight of things too, I want to talk about the crew for just a second, because we had this great scene with Talia Kiali in the fight sequence she had.
Oh,
That was so great to see that character, because that's one thing we hadn't seen since her introduction a whole lot, was her using her strength, her using her abilities. And so I really like seeing that. And I find it funny because I go back to one of our biggest knocks of season 2, especially, was a lot of Bortus-centric storylines.
Yeah.
And it feels like now Bortus has really taken a back seat. And I'm like, okay.
Which I'm fine with right now.
I'm fine to a point, but they could have done more with Bortus in this type of episode.
Yeah, him being strong and or maybe being immune to something. Yeah, nice. I get your point. Yeah.
So they just got to find a little bit more balance here, because now. But again, I think the biggest downfall of this episode is the very tropey-ness of it, and the fact that the characters were affected. There just wasn't weight to it. It just,
I hear you.
It was there.
Okay. A couple things I wanted to bring up, and then I'm going to ask you your any other comments or reactions you have this episode. But the Genesis episode of Star Trek Next Generation had another similarity. Now it's in a quick scene in the episode, but if you go on Google, you can see stills of Lieutenant Barclay, that he is kind of transforms into this weird spider character. And if you actually look at his makeup that's done, it looks a lot like when our admiral is infected and he's in the medical bay, and you see his transformation starting to take place. It looks a lot like the makeup that Barclay had done. And but then, of course, it just gets weird. But when you see the full alien transformation, there still is some comparison. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, I did, especially the eyes. The eyes were a big tell. But yeah, again, I'm going back to what you said, Kevin. You had Brandon Braga writing this episode as well as that episode, and maybe he needs to do a refresh of his files in his head because he borrowed from himself quite liberally in this episode. And if granted, now we're talking about probably we're of a generation, we've watched all those episodes. People of a new generation may not have seen these episodes and gone back to that. But yeah, this episode definitely borrowed, again, and come back. It borrowed liberally from those Star Trek episodes and just from a lot of basic science fiction scary movie tropes.
Yes, agreed. The other thing I just want to mention is I'm really digging the new design of the uniforms. I have an Orville costume. It's an admiral's uniform that's from it's a combination between the first and the second season, but the accoutrements on it are from the second season of the Orville. But I'm kind of liking the new designs. They look sharp. I was noticing Boris has got this really wide neck around his and everything, but and some of the little tech and scanning devices and stuff like that, the show looks really sharp when it comes to the costume design, of course, and the set designs. Your thoughts?
I agree with you completely. And I mentioned this last week, Kevin, and I really want to emphasize it this week. I love the new shuttle design.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah.
I love the design of that shuttle. It looks almost like a fight. It almost looks a little like it's a fighter in its own right.
Right.
But it has a lot sleeker design. I like that aspect. But yeah, this is the one thing I can say about the season of the Orville without any question. To me, the improvements of the visual effects, the sets, the costumes, everything. It's not. There's been nothing they've changed to me that has been a downgrade. Everything is an improvement. And as far as the costuming, the makeup, everything like that goes, I love the new bridge. I love their engineering. I love the design of the engineering.
It does. It looks great. It does.
Yeah.
Did you have any other comments or reactions to this week's episode?
Just not so much to this week's episode, but to something that I'm hoping as we get deeper into this season is, I want to see some of our other characters get moments, and I have trust in Seth that will happen.
Yeah.
But I want to see it get a little lighter, and I want to see, see more with Malloy. I want to see more with a little bit more. I want to see some of the plot lines that we've invested in with Bortus throughout the run get a little bit of payoff before this is done. I mean, give me one Bortus-centric episode to deal with some of that, because I think there are some interesting plot lines with Bortus that haven't been fully resolved yet. I'd like to see more with Galley. I'd like to see another episode about our new ensign. So let's spread the wealth around and give me a good Ed and Kelly episode. Not so much the relationship thing, but those two work so well together with their back and forth banter that I enjoy that aspect of their relationship very much.
I agree with what you said. I want to see an Ed-centric episode. I asked for it, at the end of last season, but I want to see. I'm forgetting her name, but the curl, I know the curl woman that he fell for when she was, human undercover and stuff. I want to see her kind of come back in a part that I think is important, because I think we will see more Union and Krill working together against the Kaelon or what have you. But I definitely want to see more of that happening there. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and let's get into some subspace signals here. All right. Well, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network's Union Federation on the Subspace channels. First of all, if you're listening to this, make sure you check out the YouTube channel. We're dropping our episodes there on YouTube to watch. And also, please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network. We would love to get up to the next level of subscribers there. We appreciate your support there. And plus, you'll be notified of all upcoming shows. And also when we go live as well, which we do from time to time. Our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. And also, please check out our Fandom Podcast Network Facebook page and also our Union Federation podcast Facebook page, where we, of course, are dropping stuff on Star Trek and the Orville there. Union Federation is also on Twitter and Instagram. You can email us at theunionfederation@gmail.com. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom.
Awesome. And you can also find the rest of our crew. Haley is on Twitter at Trekkie01D, and Amy is also on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. And we're also in partnership with the BQN. We're dropping episodes from that network on ours as well, and they're also sharing ours. They are on Twitter and Instagram at BQN Podcast, and also check out their Facebook group as well, the BQN Collective. All right, Kyle. So our next episode of Union Federation is going to be discussing Strange New Worlds Season 1 as it continues. Episode 6 also dropped this week, and we're going to be doing an episode for that. And next week we have episode 7 to look forward to. And we're wondering if the Orville is going to get a little bit lighter. The episode's called Mortality Paradox. I don't know.
It could. It depends on which direction we're going. I want to throw this out, too, for the listeners real quick, so there isn't confusion. While the Orville and Strange New Worlds will be overlapping, we are going to do separate drops, one show covering the Orville, one show covering Strange New Worlds. This is just because we know there are some people out there who do just like the Orville, and some people who out there just do like Strange New Worlds, and maybe not the Orville. So we're trying to get it to where you can listen to that show directly, because you know what? We love our listeners, both the wonderful Orville fans out there and the amazing Star Trek fans. We just want to make it a little easier for you to where you are getting to listen to what you want to listen to.
Great. Yes. And again, please check out the Fandom Podcast Network for other great shows on the network. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. I think we did pretty well by ourselves here. What do you say we get out of this expanse? Because there is no stars. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah, and I don't see the Rocinante. Oh wait, that's the actual expanse show. So yeah, we're good. Let's hit the quantum drive. Get us out of here, Kevin.
All right. Thank you guys again. Goodbye, everyone. And our hailing frequencies are now closed.